Where I live is the top of a mountain. It's a place we call Bermuda. Most of this mountain is underwater. Bermuda used to be several thousand feet above sea level. That would have made a mountain bigger than Everest if you count what lay below the surface of the ocean. Rising sea level is submerged volcano. Over millions of years, layers of sand covered the seamount that became the Bermuda Islands. Then the wind, rain, and waves wore the sandstone down again. Now the summit of Bermuda is barely 300 feet above sea level. But if you're a whale living in the ocean, Bermuda still looks like a giant mountain rising 14,000 feet from the depths. "21 square miles of this mountaintop lie above the sea like a big fish hook. 500 years ago, no one lived here. Now 65,000 of us live in Bermuda. And we all live within a mile of the ocean. Although Bermuda is one of the most crowded places on Earth, it doesn't feel that way. We don't have thick forests full of wildlife. We don't have rivers or lakes, or not even small freshwater stream. We can't drive long distances to a cottage or cabin in the woods. From the viewpoint of a kid living on top of this mountain, we don't have any mountains we can climb either. But we do have the ocean all around us. And the ocean is full of wildlife. We have 400 square miles of shallow waters, lagoons, and reef we can explore. Because we are surrounded by water, it's easy to learn to swim on this mountain. There are lots and lots of places where you can easily swim with a fish right from the shore. Sometimes I snook on my dad's back. We just swam from the beach to follow a hogfish feeding on shellfish in shallow water. This is me when I was 4. The sea is denser than fresh water, so it's easier to swim but harder to dive. This is Bermuda's angelfish. Aren't they pretty? When I was 5, I started using fins and could dive deeper. I could also swim faster, but not as fast as these try. Then I used Dad's mask and snorkel. I could keep my head down longer. Sometimes I cheat and get Dad to feed the fish so they come right up to me. Being surrounded by ocean, Bermudans should be worried about what's happening to our ocean environment. Come take a look. Which can trap turtles and drown them. When I see how we don't look after our precious ocean, I feel sad. I don't say in the olden days there were so many large fish. It's easy to think they are exaggerating, but with each generation, us kids accept fewer numbers and smaller fish as normal. If we aren't careful, all my children will see is a lonely trunk fish scavenging on a barren seafloor. But it doesn't have to be like that. Bermudans came up with some of the first marine environmental protection laws. This is North Shore Coral Reef Reserve. Sometimes Dad and I go out to the reserve. While I ride on his back, he looks for fish. Once he finds something interesting, I get off his back and go. The most colorful fish live near the surface, and you don't have to dive with scuba tanks to see them. The reefs that surround our mountaintop island are further north than any coral reef system in the world. They provide us with plenty of shallow waters to play in. Lots of people think Bermuda is in the tropics. New York is closer to us than the Caribbean islands. Bermuda's marine life is in delicate balance with its coral reef environment. Fish pots were banned in 1990. This helped our coral reefs remain healthy by protecting the parrotfish. They keep the coral reefs healthy by eating algae. To keep the beauty of our underwater world for everyone to enjoy, we have protected areas that are surrounding lagoons and ocean. This is near North Rock. You might be really lucky if you find a grouper. Let's follow him into his cave. Bermuda used to be called the Isle of Devils. For hundreds of years, sailors crossing the North Atlantic looked for Bermuda in the middle of the ocean to help navigate from Europe to the New World in the Americas. Hundreds of ships were wrecked in our reefs. The ships that once carried goods across the ocean now provide a home to thousands of creatures. Not only the ghosts of sailors who inhabit these old wrecks. Tourists come to Bermuda to dive on our sunken ships. Many of our wrecks are now covered in coral. Divers have found treasure on some of the wrecks. But most of the divers who come here aren't treasure hunters. They just want to see our wrecks and photograph them. Some of these sunken ships are very old, some are more recent. Some are small and some are huge. Some are in very shallow water and others are much deeper. Here's a coral cave near a wreck. It's full of these tiny fish called glassy sweepers. Fish will make their home around anything floating in the ocean like the sparrow. But if you do dive deeper, you can see loads of interesting things that you can't see snorkeling. These are cleaner fish at the cleaning station. They are waiting for larger fish to come along to be cleaned. This barracuda might be a bit more than they bargained for. These reefs that look so pretty are also the ones that are so dangerous for ships. But this barracuda isn't something we have to worry about. One of my favorite fish is the trumpet fish. And if you follow him, he might lead you to an unexplored cave. As you can see, Bermuda is full of marine life. My name is Elsa Stewartson. This is me when I was a year old. It's my first experience with the ocean. After that, I made sure I was better equipped when we would go down to the beach. I was born in Bermuda, and this is the beach at the end of a drive. I'm 6 now, and this is my home. This is where I learned to swim in a rock pool at the edge of the ocean.
I didn't bring my wetsuit, no.
Why?
You can go in.
In the winter, the water is often warmer than the air temperature.
It's not cold.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Whoa!
Can I have my boogie board?
Sure.
You don't have to go out in the water to see our marine wildlife. On our shores you'll find all kinds of creatures. I've been coming to this beach looking for critters ever since I can remember.
It will not hurt. We can touch this.
Doesn't hurt?
No. Touch it, Daddy. Touch it.
Oh.
Let's break it up.
There's a shell. Right in front of you. No, here.
Yeah. I know. Hey, that's not the sound. That's where creature lives.
Thanks.
One spring day, my dad and I were out on the beach looking for creatures. Suddenly a whale jumped right out of the water. It was less than 100 yards away. What was that? I asked. A whale, my dad replied. Why does he do that? I asked. Dad didn't know. The next 6 months we researched the humpback whales. We learned these are some of the biggest creatures that ever lived, bigger even than the biggest dinosaurs.
Every winter, the North Atlantic humpbacks migrate thousands of miles from their northern feeding grounds to the Caribbean, where they mate. Adult humpback whales are about 40 to 45 feet long. They weigh about a ton per foot. You can easily tell a humpback whale from other large whales by their very long pectoral fins, which are about 1/3 of their body length. Soon after mating, the females start another migration to return to their northern feeding grounds. A year after mating, the pregnant mothers give birth to their calves. Humpback calves are born about 12 to 16 feet long. The newborn calves and their mothers remain in shallow water for the first weeks to avoid predators. Here, the young calves nurse safely on their mother's fat-rich milk. The calves grow about a foot each month. As they grow bigger, their mothers get thinner and thinner. Because whales are mammals, not fish, they breathe air, are warm-blooded, give live birth, feed their young milk, and even have hair. Unlike fish, they swim by moving their tails up and down rather than from side to side. Humpback whales, like all whales, breathe through blowholes on the top of their heads. While the adults can hold their breath for over half an hour, the calves must come up for air every few minutes. There is no food for the humpback adults in the Caribbean, and so after staying about 4 months, the calves and their starving mothers must leave for their northern feeding grounds. This long-distance journey across the open Atlantic Ocean is dangerous. They must travel thousands of miles where predators such as orcas, also known as killer whales, lie in wait. Finally, the humpbacks arrive in the rich, cooler waters up north. Here, the icy Labrador Current turns south past Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. Warm Gulf Stream waters combine warmth with nutrients to fuel plankton growth that supports shoals of fish like mackerel, herring, and capelin. At the end of the summer, with their bellies full, the humpbacks cross the ocean once again to return to the Caribbean. Do they travel singly or together? We know quite a lot about humpback behavior in their feeding grounds and breeding grounds closer to shore, but marine scientists still don't know much about their mid-ocean lives at all.
When I was young, I wanted to be a dinosaur. Then I decided to be a paleontologist. Finally, I wanted to be a zookeeper. But Dad told me we have a golden opportunity to study humpback whales in the middle of the ocean. So I started helping Dad with his project.
Looking at the atlas, we could see Bermuda lies in the direct route of their mid-ocean migratory crossings each spring, from their breeding grounds in the Caribbean to their feeding grounds in eastern Canada, Labrador, Greenland, and Iceland. Bermuda plays an important part of humpback history. Bermudian Frank Watlington made the first recordings of humpback whales. In the 1950s and 60s, Watlington worked at the American Naval Sonar Base in Bermuda, listening for submarines. Each spring, strange sounds were recorded by the sonar devices. It was Watlington who solved the mystery by identifying the sounds as humpbacks singing offshore. Some of Watlington's recordings were released as an LP called Songs of the Humpback Whale. The cries of the whales helped to end commercial whaling. In 1979, Watlington's recordings were also included in National Geographic magazine as a sound sheet. Voyager Golden Records and the Voyager space probe are carrying whale songs into outer space, with other sounds representing planet Earth. But we still don't know why the humpbacks are singing here in Bermuda.
To find out something more about the answers to our questions, we went back in history.
Whalers have settled many of the New World's outer frontiers. Offshore whaling probably began here in 1616. In the early days, Bermudians needed whales for lamp oil, for food, and the skin for leather. Bermudians were unsuccessful at capturing humpbacks until they realized that by harpooning the curious calf, which would often come to the whaling boat, the mother would not leave her wounded calf until she herself was harpooned and killed. The last whale taken in Bermuda was in 1940. the dead whale was towed to Darrell's Wharf, where spectators were charged sixpence for whale watching. By then, the great whales had almost become extinct. The harpoon gun and attached exploding bomb spelled the end of the great whales. The steam engine on whaling boats meant that even the faster whales, like the blue whale and fin whale, were being hunted to extinction. The International Whaling Commission, or IWC, stopped the hunting of whales in 1982 because there weren't enough whales to make it profitable, not because of any public outcry. Norway and Iceland are no longer members of the International Whaling Commission, and they continue to hunt whales. Japan claims it kills whales for research. Every year, fast Japanese catcher boats kill several hundred whales in Antarctica. The whales are processed on a factory ship. Despite their claims that killing whales is done for research, the meat is sold commercially at markets in Japan.
Humpbacks are baleen whales. When they open their mouths wide, the grooves under the jaw expand to gulp water containing food. Then the lid of the mouth is closed and the water is filtered through the baleen with a push of the tongue. Whales face other dangers beside whaling. The very first humpback whale I saw close up was dead. Had it been hit by a ship, or had he swallowed something too big for his throat? Baleen whales' throats are so narrow that a rope or bucket could choke a whale. This is the baleen that has been knocked out of the dead whale's mouth. This humpback calf has nylon rope tangled around his head. Its mother was starving and it had a big shark bite out of its tail. Local fishermen reported a whale with green drift net around its head. Dad found the drift net 4 days later. Somehow the whale had managed to escape the hangman's noose before he drowned. Not all whales are so lucky.
The other threat to humpback calves are the orcas. Orcas are not whales, they are dolphins. Their common name, killer whale, came from sailors who witnessed orca attacks on many different whale species, including the humpbacks. Although these attacks have rarely been witnessed, the fact that a third of the North Atlantic humpback whales have the typical raking scars of the orca's teeth is proof of the threat the orcas are to the calves on their first migration.
That spring we watched from the south shore for the whales migrating by, so we can learn more about the humpbacks and why they did some of the things they did. Dad decided to try and film them underwater so we could understand them better. In 2007, first year of the project, Dad used a small 24-foot boat out of Devonshire Bay. This was perfect for getting out quickly to where the whales were. By now he had some dedicated volunteers to help out. Sometimes he took me with him. He even let me drive the big boat.
In the shallow waters off South Shore, we often found mothers and calves. It seemed that they were resting. We found whales 1 out of every 3 days we went out. Often the whales were in the same place as the fishing boats, on the windward edge of the seamounts. Were the whales feeding on nutrient-rich waters created by an upwelling of deep water? Once I dived with the whales on these upwellings and was close to the whales, but I couldn't see them. There was so much plankton in the water. Where we thought the whales were feeding, I collected water samples. These samples were full of copepods, decapods, tiny fish eggs, and krill. I discovered some old research papers that showed the quantity of zooplankton around Bermuda is highest during March and April, when the humpback whales migrate by. I also found out that Bermuda has as much as 70% of the zooplankton of the humpback summer feeding areas. One day I photographed a whale lobtailing. I was about to delete one of these photos because it wasn't perfectly framed, when I realized it showed the whale defecating. If the whales have been starving down in the Caribbean for 4 to 5 months, then this photo is the first evidence they are feeding on the seamounts. It answers a question that has puzzled scientists for a long time.
After more than 200 hours on the water looking at whales, Dad still didn't know the answers to a lot of his questions. It seemed the more we began to know, the more we didn't know. At the end of the first season, we didn't have a minute of underwater footage of whales. The fishermen told Dad all the whales had gone, but Dad kept going out hoping to film them. It was almost May when the North Atlantic bottlenose dolphins shrouded the boat. He had filmed them riding the bow wave, then he got into the water. Soon he noticed the clicking sound changed. The body language became more nervous. Dad looked below and there was a whale. It was if magical whale, that's what we call him now, wanted to communicate.
She's going to pose for the camera.
At times he seems to reach out to Dad with his petrol fins to draw him closer. Sometimes he lay a couple of feet underneath Dad, as if he was listening to his heartbeat.
No, they might follow him on the radio.
Over and over he came to Dad and stared at him.
Can you pet her? Uh-oh.
When another whale came, things changed and Dad began to feel nervous. He could tell by the body language that magical whale didn't want a new whale around. The two whales whacked the waters with their flukes and flippers, and Dad disappeared in the splashing.
Now come back a little bit.
There he is. Come here. Come on in, Andrew. To the boat, please.
Eventually, the other whale left. Once he was alone again with Dad, magical whale was as calm as can be.
This whale
sail.
When Magical Whale danced around Dad like a ballet dancer, was he communicating to him? So you see, using words, us humans don't have the ability to communicate without words. Whatever Magical Whale's waving signals meant, their meaning was lost on Dad.
Yeah, that definitely looks like a male.
Twice fishing boats came to see what was going on, and Magical Whale swam off. Dad had to change the film and the camera,
She's waiting for you, Andrew.
and as soon as he got back into the water, the Magical Whale swam back down, as gently and calmly as can be, like a tame pet dog.
Oh, that's right.
But this was a wild animal, 45 feet long and weighed 40 tons.
Here she comes.
This wasn't a curious calf swimming by and returning for another look. This was a powerful one-on-one experience. The whale totally focused on Dad's presence. After weeks of searching for whales, this whale had found Dad.
Absolutely feet away. Andrew's in the water, 5 feet from this 60-foot, 40-foot animal, filming it. I'm filming him while he's filming this creature, and everything is dead stationary. It's oil calm. It's absolutely so exciting, Greta. The whale's got his head out of the water. Andrew's probably 3 feet from it. The two of them are just looking at each other. Very, very exciting. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a story of a lifetime, Dada. Love you. Talk to you. Cheersy.
The Atlantic species has the white, fully white flipper, while the Pacific...
For days and weeks afterwards, Dad kept asking himself, what was that whale thinking? Why had he come to him? For a week he couldn't sleep, and for a month Dad found it hard to talk about the experience. That summer, Dad went to the College of the Atlantic in Maine, where the research group, Allied Whale, keeps a catalogue of individual North Atlantic humpback whale fluke photographs.
There I met with Dr. Peter Stevick and other faculty members. Researchers have discovered that individual humpbacks can be identified by the unique black and white patterns on the underside of a whale's fluke, similar to fingerprints for humans. Photographs of the underside of the whale's tail, called fluke IDs, identify almost 7,000 individual North Atlantic humpback whales. From 1968 to 2006, 146 whale fluke IDs were made here in Bermuda, with 44 matches. We tried to match Magical Whale's fluke ID also, but nothing matched. I was surprised. I thought Magical Whale was a whale that made a habit of mugging boats by coming up to them. But Magical Whale had never been photographed before, and the mystery of what Magical Whale was doing and who he was deepened. But I did match the other whale that had been with Magical Whale. He was photographed 29 years earlier by Professor Hal Whitehead in 1978 in Newfoundland and hadn't been seen since. We thought we found the same whale exactly a year later, but the fluke wasn't a match.
That summer we followed the whales to Nova Scotia. We drove around the coast looking for whales, and we found nice camping places overlooking the ocean and listened for the whales at night. Sometimes early in the morning we heard a splish, splash, splosh of whales bleaching. Dad insists that whales can't fly, and there was no point of looking at the sky. Sometimes there was so much fog, I couldn't tell if I was looking at the sky or not. But because I was not looking in the right places, I found krill that the whales feed on. We went out on whale watching trips, but as usual, I felt seasick. And Dad still hadn't found Magical Whale. There was one place we went to where there were humpbacks everywhere. Bly Island on the Bay of Fundy. It is as far as you can get away from it all. The only thing to do there is to go whale watching. That's when I saw my first live humpback whale close up.
Wow.
So you might notice you can get a good look at him here. He's
What?
It's a humpback whale.
And those are the...
Is it your humpback whale?
It wasn't Dad's Magical Whale. We could tell because it didn't have a big scar on the right side of its face. It was at the end of summer and the whales had been feeding for months and were fat and content. By then I had enough of whales and was more into my dinosaurs. Those are long-necked Brontosaurus dinosaurs you can see me playing with. Some whales acted just like Magical Whale had acted with Dad.
When you're falling.
Look, Elsa, look at the whales. Look at
These friendly whales recognize the whale watching boats because these whales come back here year after year. Just like Magical Whale, these humpbacks wanted to play and communicate too.
Uncle Henry touched it.
He does smell. He's been feeding on herring.
What is it? Is it feeding?
Here's pectoral fin.
No. My arm can't even reach the water.
Here it comes.
It was hard to figure out who the tourists were. Were the whales watching us? Or were we watching the whales?
You guys have pretty good photos.
The summer after that we went to Newfoundland. The whaling had gone on for hundreds of years. Bones of dead whales lay everywhere. Many of these outports relied on whaling and fishing for a living. As usual, I wasn't looking just for whales. I found whales' food, krill again. In Newfoundland, it was easy to spot whales. We just walked along the coastline, and when we found whales, we'd just stop and watch. Sometimes we could see groups of whales feeding close to the shore. Then we went further north, where it was really cold. We saw fin whales. These are the only second to the blue whales in size. Like blue whales and minke whales, they are built for speed. We also saw sperm whales. Sometimes we saw all of them in one day. I also saw my first icebergs. Seeing icebergs was the best part of that trip. And we watched the humpbacks come right up to the shore to feed on capelin. Whales feed on capelin during the spawning season. The capelin move in large schools onto sandy beaches where they die after spawning. Capelin are found in the Atlantic and Arctic oceans. They migrate in spring and summer to feed in the plankton-rich ocean around Newfoundland, Iceland, Greenland, and Norway. The biggest predator of the capelin used to be cod. Now cod are almost gone because of overfishing. And as usual, I got seasick again. Back in Bermuda, Dad started going out in a bigger boat to Challenger Bay, 15 miles offshore. By now, he knew where to find whales, and every time he went out, he found or heard whales. Here's a mother with her calf riding on her back, and an escort with another whale alongside. He began to answer our first question. Why does a whale breach? It seems whales breach to show off to a female, or to intimidate a male, or to let another whale know where they are, or to get rid of sea lice. Maybe they just breach for the fun of it. Sometimes he found a calf with his mother and an escort. Sometimes there are other whales following the escort. Sometimes they seem to be feeding, and sometimes they seem to be milling around. Here's a mother and calf with 3 dolphins riding on the nose whale of the mother. You can see the baby, Humpback, riding on the mother's back. And here's another reason they breach: to get rid of the dolphins riding on their noses. A baby calf was spotted here in early January, a sign that the humpbacks may be breeding and feeding here during the winter months.
That winter, a Japanese fisheries agency patrol boat came into Hamilton Harbor. Despite the worldwide ban on commercial whaling, the Japanese allocate themselves an annual quota to kill several hundred minke whales in the name of science. Some Japanese scientists believe that the minke whale are eating too many fish. It is not the remaining whales that are wiping out the fish. It is unregulated industrial fishing that feeds our growing human population.
Good evening, everyone. It's Friday, January 11th. I'm Diane Brewer, and thanks for joining us tonight. Leading our stories, it could happen here, warn anti-whaling protesters, as a small but vociferous group of them gathered at the flagpole in Hamilton to heighten awareness of the threat that Japanese whaling and overfishing poses to the island's oceans. Gary Moreno has the story.
What they lacked in numbers, they certainly made up for in commitment, as they sought to drive home the message to the crew of the Japanese fisheries patrol boat moored in Hamilton Harbor that whaling, even for so-called scientific reasons, was unacceptable. Spokesperson for the group, naturalist Andrew Stevenson, telling us the purpose of the protest was to heighten awareness of how much of a threat the activities of the Japanese authorities posed to the ecology of the world's oceans.
They kill 1,000 whales a year. They've killed 25,000 whales since 1986 under the pretext of scientific research. And believe it, they can do it here if they want to. There's nothing to stop them. There's a loophole in the International Whaling Commission's regulations that say if you do scientific research, you can kill whales, even if that's 1,000 a year.
In the end, Mr. Stevenson and his group sought to present the crew with a figurine of a humpback whale as a token of appreciation for Japan's not taking any humpback whales during that country's annual hunt this year. However, the gift was refused by the Japanese captain, and it was left for Mr. Stevenson's daughter to retrieve what was also meant as a token of friendship. Gary Moreno, reporting for the Bermuda Broadcasting News.
Meanwhile, the Japanese government is facing the possibility of a hefty fine for overfishing bluefin tuna in Australian waters, despite the presence there of a Japanese fisheries patrol boat like this one to ensure Japan's fishermen did not harvest more than their allotted quota of the endangered species.
This highlights the tragedy of the commons. The oceans are not governed by any single nation. It is common property, shared by all. But individuals often take more out of the sea than is sustainable. They obtain a private gain by acting selfishly, but at a cost to the rest of society. Even if there were strict controls, who would enforce them? There is no policing outside of a country's territorial waters. Greenpeace and Sea Shepherd are fighting the whalers, illegal longliners, driftnet trawlers, and bottom trawlers. A lot of people view Sea Shepherd as a pirate organization breaking international laws.
Others view sea shepherds as heroes for doing something about those who rob us kids of our natural inheritance. Maybe it takes a pirate to catch a pirate. Maybe not all pirates are bad pirates. Meanwhile, Dad continued his research.
In 2009, we managed to get over 152 individual fluke IDs, more than all the fluke IDs ever obtained in Bermuda. So far, we have matched about half of those to previous sightings. Some unexpected migration patterns are starting to show. Many humpbacks have been resighted in Bermuda, a sign that the humpbacks are stopping in Bermuda regularly. I also started using a hydrophone to listen for the whales, just as Frank Watlington did decades earlier. We heard whales singing a lot of the time on the crown of Challenger Bank. Are the humpbacks aggregating on these seamounts into larger social groups to protect their calves from orcas before continuing their migration? In the spring of 2009, 6 humpbacks were satellite tagged in the Caribbean. One of these female whales, with a young calf, swam to the west of Bermuda and then stopped for some days to our northwest before swimming back down towards Bermuda in the opposite direction to her migration. Had she heard a whale singing and come back to join it before traveling northwards in a protective unit? We still don't know that much about the humpback whales.
Whenever I'm down on our beach, I look out for a magical whale. Often I see a splash all the pluff from a blowhole. It's not hard to see if you look. In the evening when I'm playing on the beach, I think I can hear the whales breathing off the breakers. In the olden days, the settlers were woken up by the sounds of lots of whales just offshore. When it's really quiet, I think I hear them singing. Sometimes I think that the whales come to our beach, calling out to me to swim with them. Sometimes it's magical whales' calf that comes to see me. If I do see magical whale, I wave. One night, when I was lying in bed, I saw a full moon outside my window. I thought I could hear the whales singing. That night, I imagined the life story of a magical whale. I dreamt that 60 years ago, magical whale's mother hovered very still in the shallow waters of the Silver Bank in the Caribbean. She was waiting to mate. A year later, she returned to the same reef near shipwreck. In my dream, magical whale was born on a full moon beside a coral reef. He took his first mouthful of water and surfaced to take his first breath. For the next 2 weeks, he stayed close to his mother, swimming in circles above her and feeding her for milk. Magical Whale's mother took him on longer and longer swims to help him build up strength and confidence he would need to migrate thousands of miles north. She also taught him to ride on her back so he could save his energy. Soon Magical Whale was practicing breaching. Like all young kids, Magical Whale loved to play. But more than anything, he loved to dance. Finally, the day came when they had to begin their migration north. They were some of the last whales to leave the safe waters of the Caribbean. The journey was a long and dangerous one, taking them several thousand miles north. But first they would stop at a seamount called Challenger, 15 miles off Bermuda, almost exactly halfway to Newfoundland, their next stop. In my fantasy, hundreds of miles south of Bermuda, they heard a whale singing. A whale that they recognized, a whale that was going to the same feeding grounds. For 3 days, they swam around the singer on Challenger Bank waiting and waiting. His songs were about half an hour long. Each year he added a little bit more to last year's song. I imagine that Magical Whale's mother had been attacked by orcas near Newfoundland when she was a calf. 2 orcas had bitten onto her tail flukes, slowing her down, while another orca rode on top of her trying to drown her. In my story, the humpback whales had fought off the orcas. Magical Whale's mother had survived, but she had never forgotten the experience. By traveling with other whales, Magical Whale's mother knew there was less chance of Magical Whale being attacked in the same way. I dreamt on the 4th day, Magical Whale and his mother continued their migration northwards. Now they are no longer swimming alone. They were followed by a singer who would escort them all the way to the feeding grounds. In my make-believe adventure, there were 10 more whales. They remained together to protect Magical Whale against the orcas up north. Magical Whale returned a year later from the Caribbean. He was with his mother to Bermuda on their way north to the feeding grounds. He was now 26 feet long, almost double the size he'd been when he first came to Bermuda. Despite spending the winter in the Caribbean, he was also very fat because he was still feeding off his mother's milk. He weighed more than his mother, even if he wasn't as long as her. His mother rested in shallow waters of Bermuda platform. She was tired from feeding her calf or not eating, but she was still very protective of her son. She knew that when they reached the feeding grounds, Magical Whale would begin feeding on his own. Although he was a year older and much bigger, Magical Whale was just a calf and liked to play and dance. His mother saved her energy while Magical Whale danced around her. I imagined one day Magical Whale heard a whale singing. He swam to the Challenger Bank where he found 5 juvenile females. They had spent the winter on the seamounts in the middle of the ocean. They played with Magical Whale. One of them was 7 years old and very flirtatious. This would be her last year wintering in the middle of the ocean. Next winter she would make her first migration down to the Caribbean, where she would find a mate. All the time, Magical Whale played with these females. They remained close together for protection. If one of them turned around, they all turned around. I dreamt that early the next morning, the singing stopped. The 5 females began on their own migration north to the Gulf of Maine, where they returned to the same coastline where they'd spent the previous summers. Magical Whale followed, but soon he returned to his mother. They were going on their own migration, much further north, to Labrador and then Greenland. In my make-believe story, our Magical Whale, he is almost 60 years old now, but he still likes to play and to dance. Some whales are good singers, some whales are good dancers. Magical Whale's a good dancer. Magical Whale has survived the whales, harpoons, and orca attacks. He has escaped from being entangled in fishermen's nets. He is one of the oldest humpbacks around, but he still loves to dance and to play. Dad tells me he still wonders what Magical Whale was trying to tell him that day. But I think Dad got the message. Maybe one day I'll get to swim this Magical Whale. That would be nice.